The lights of the Galactic Gene Repository never dimmed. They hung above the endless vault like frozen stars, cold and perfect, illuminating row after row of crystalline helixes that stretched farther than any living eye could follow. 4,800 years after Earth's last recorded transmission, the repository still breathed. It breathed the way a cathedral breathes when no one is inside, quietly, reverently waiting. Zertal moved between the aisles in silence, his forearms folded behind his back the way senior archivists were taught. His skin, pale violet and faintly luminescent, caught the light of the helixes and threw it back in softer hues. He had walked these corridors for 2 centuries. He knew every chime, every whisper of the air recyclers, every tremor of the gravity plates, and yet tonight the repository felt watchful. He paused before Helix 9,004,117, the tag read, species designation, Veyari, origin world, Veyar prime, purity index, 99.9997%, good enough for the Council's new mandate. His lower left hand brushed the access node. The helix unfolded in the air before him, a slow spiral of silver and sapphire light. He inhaled the sterile scent of ionized crystal and began the routine deletion protocol. A single command. A single line of Terran marker code to be severed from the lattice of life. His fingers hesitated above the confirmation glyph. It was nothing, really. A flicker, a microsecond delay in the rendering lattice. But Zertal had spent 200 years learning to trust microsecond delays. He zoomed, he traced. He followed the Terran marker not outward, but inward, deeper into the Veyari genome than any purge had ever needed to go. And there it was, not a trace, not contamination. A foundation. The marker was not stitched into the genome like some ancient viral scar. It was the scaffold. Remove it and the entire helix collapsed into nonsense. The Veyari were not 0.0003% human. They were human rearranged, human re-expressed, human rewritten across 4 arms and bioluminescent skin, and a second heart that beat in perfect counter rhythm to the first. Zertal's breath fogged the inside of his mask. He stepped back as though the helix might burn him. His upper right hand rose, almost of its own accord, and made the old sign of warding his creche mother had taught him when he was small. A circle over the primary heart, then the secondary. A superstition from a water moon that no longer existed. The repository's lights did not flicker. And yet for a moment the silence felt like listening. He forced himself to move again, faster now, heels clicking against the polished obsidian floor. Called up the next species, then the next, Keldari, Thresni, the silicon-based Mykari whose genomes were stored as quantum resonance instead of base pairs, every single one. The pattern repeated, Terran marker present, Terran marker structural, Terran marker load-bearing, his knees buckled. He caught himself against a data pillar, palms flat, forehead pressed to the cold surface. The pillar's emergency light bathed his face in crimson. No, he whispered. The word tasted like rust. This is not possible, but the data did not care about possibility. 4,000 years ago, the Grand Council had declared humanity extinct, a failed seed, a genetic dead end that had scorched its cradle and gone silent. The Purge Edict of 800 CE had been unanimous. Every trace of Terran DNA was to be edited from the galactic tree of life, quietly, cleanly, like removing a cancerous node before it metastasized. They had burned libraries. They had sterilized seed vaults. They had sent hunter-killer nanites to devour any fragment of human code that drifted between the stars. And still, Zertal straightened. His reflection in the polished floor looked suddenly old. The violet of his skin had gone ashen. He forced his voice steady and addressed the empty air. Repository, open secure channel to Counselor Prime Vericel Cal. The air shimmered. A hologram blossomed. A tall Veyari female in the white and gold robes of the highest circle. Her eyes were the color of deep space. Archivist Zertal, she greeted, voice smooth as glacier water. Your nightly report is early. He swallowed. Counselor Prime, the purification protocol, there is an anomaly. Her crest lifted slightly. Interest, not alarm, yet define anomaly. He sent her the data in a single encrypted burst. The helixes, the structural markers, the collapse simulations, everything. silence stretched between stars. When Cal spoke again, her voice had gone very quiet. You are certain these findings are not an artifact of degraded storage. I triple verified against the original crystalline lattice. The degradation, Counselor, is in our understanding. Another silence. Longer. Then delete your local copies. Seal the wing. Come to the spire. Alone, bring nothing. The hologram winked out. Zertal stood in the sudden dark of his own thoughts. The repository lights had dimmed to emergency gold, as they always did when a secure channel closed. Somewhere far above, the great ring engines kept the station in perfect synchronous orbit around a dead star. Gravity felt heavier tonight. He looked back at Helix 9,004,117. The Veyari helix still turned slowly, serene, innocent. A creature that had never known it was descended from a species that sang hymns in falling bomb shelters and wrote poetry on the walls of concentration camps. A species that refused to die quietly even when the universe demanded it. His hand rose again. This time he did not make the warding sign. He made another, older, human. He pressed 2 fingers to his lips, then to the helix. "I'm sorry," he whispered to the ghost in the code. "We thought we were cleaning you out. We didn't know we were cutting out our own hearts." The helix pulsed once, as though it heard. Zertal turned and walked toward the transit shaft. His footsteps echoed like slow heartbeats. Behind him, millions of helixes kept their ancient vigil, glowing softly in the dark. He did not look back, but as the lift doors sealed and the car began its long ascent toward the spire, a single line of text appeared on every dormant screen in the sealed wing. No alarm sounded. No log recorded it. Just 6 words in a language the repository had been ordered to forget 4,000 years ago. "We are still here. Thank you for looking." And in the absolute silence that followed, something vast and quiet and older than stars seemed to exhale. The transit shaft rose through the bones of the station like a bullet through black water. No windows, no sound except the low hum of magnetic rails. Zertal stood alone in the glass cylinder, 4 arms clasped behind him, eyes fixed on nothing. The lift was fast, 30 kilometers in 90 seconds, but tonight the seconds stretched like centuries. He kept seeing the helixes, kept seeing that impossible line of text that should never have appeared. "We are still here. Thank you for looking." He had wiped the wing's memory cores himself. He had watched the purge cascade complete. There should have been no residual power, no ghost signal, no way for anything to write across every screen at once. And yet the words had been there, calm and certain, in perfect old Terran Anglic. The lift decelerated. His stomach floated for an instant, then settled. The doors sighed open onto the spire's apex chamber. The Council of 12 waited beneath a dome of living starlight. The chamber was carved from a single piece of neutron crystal. Every breath echoed like a prayer. Gravity here was tuned to 1/10 standard, so the counselors could sit in their ancient thrones without fatigue. The air smelled of ozone and old fear. Cal stood at the center, robes pooling around her like liquid moonlight. The other 11 sat in a semicircle behind her Keldari with their bone-white exoskeletons, Thresni whose bodies were braided light, the lone Mykari floating in a sphere of liquid mercury, all of them ancient, all of them terrified. Zertal stepped onto the star map floor and knelt. The traditional gesture felt suddenly absurd. "Rise," Vera said. Her voice carried the weight of 4,000 years of certainty. "We have reviewed your data." He rose slowly. His knees creaked. "Speak plainly, archivist," said Counselor Kresh of the Keldari, mandibles clicking. "Are you telling us the purge failed?" Zertal met Vera's eyes. "I am telling you the purge was impossible." A ripple passed through the chamber. The Thresni flickered like candle flames in wind. "Explain," Vera commanded. He did, quietly, precisely. Every simulation, every collapse cascade. The way removing the Terran scaffold unraveled not just fringe species, but the entire galactic tree of life. When he finished, the silence was so complete he could hear the blood moving in his own secondary heart. Counselor Mykari, 7 drifted forward, mercury skin rippling. Its voice arrived as pure harmonics inside his skull. "If what you say is true, archivist, then every sentient in this room is human. Descended," Zertal corrected. "Transformed, adapted. But yes, the root is Terran." "All of us?" Kresh's mandibles ground together. Heresy. No, Vera said softly. History. She stepped down from the dais. Her bare feet made no sound on the star map. She stopped an arm's length from Zertal and studied him the way a surgeon studies a tumor. You understand what this means, she said. He did. If humanity had not died, if humanity had instead exploded outward like the Big Bang itself, seeding every branch of life with its stubborn code, then the Purge Edict was not sanitation. It was genocide attempted against the ancestors of everything that breathed. It was deicide against their own origin. Vera's next words were almost gentle. The council will convene in closed session. You will remain in quarters until called. Your research is now classified beyond Omega. Speak of it to no one. Zertal inclined his head. Understood, Counselor Prime. But as the guards moved to escort him, Vera raised one hand. They froze. One more thing, she said. In your report you mentioned an unauthorized text string. His heart stuttered. A storage artifact, nothing more. Her eyes narrowed. Repeat it. He had no choice. We are still here. Thank you for looking. The Thresny counselors dimmed until they were barely visible. The Mykari sphere contracted, Mercury drawing inward like a frightened creature. Vera's crest lowered, a Veyari sign of grief so profound it was rarely seen. Thank you for looking, she echoed. They knew we would come for them eventually, and still they thanked us. She turned away, robes swirling. Take him to the sanctuary wing, full isolation, no communication. The guards gripped his upper arms. Their gloves were cold. As they marched him out, Zertal caught one last glimpse of the council. 12 ancient beings staring at the star map floor as though it had become a grave. The sanctuary wing was a lie the council told itself. A place of meditation and reflection, they called it. In truth, it was a velvet prison for those who learned things the galaxy was not ready to know. His cell was beautiful. Walls of living wood from a world that no longer existed. A bed that adjusted to every pressure point. A viewport showing the dead star the station orbited, blacker than black, drinking light. They left him there with a single instruction. Wait. He waited. Hours became days. Food appeared through silent slots. No guards spoke. No messages arrived. On the 7th day, he stood at the viewport and watched a solar flare crawl across the dead star's corpse, red as arterial blood. He spoke aloud because there was no one left to hear. They tried to kill you, he told the darkness. They burned your worlds. They rewrote your children until even the memory of your shape was gone. And still you answered with gratitude. His reflection stared back, violet skin, 4 arms, alien in every visible way. And yet for the first time he saw the echo, the proportions of the face, the forward-facing eyes, the stubborn set of the jaw, human. He pressed his palm to the glass. I don't know if you can hear me, he whispered. I don't know if prayer travels through vacuum and 4,000 years of silence, but if you can, if any part of you still listens, I need guidance. Because they're going to bury this, they'll bury me with it, and if they do, your children will never know who they really are. The dead star offered no answer, but the lights in his cell dimmed just slightly. The temperature rose a fraction of a degree, and in the silence that followed, Zertal felt something shift like a hand settling on his shoulder when no hand was there. He closed his eyes, footsteps in the corridor, real ones this time. The door opened. A young Veyari acolyte stood there, barely past creche age, eyes wide with terror and wonder. In her trembling hands she held a data shard no longer than a finger. They told me to bring this, she whispered. They said the repository itself unlocked the vault. No one gave the order, it just opened. Zertal took the shard. It was warm. On its surface, etched in microscopic script, were the same 6 words that had appeared in the sealed wing. We are still here. Thank you for looking. Below them, new text glowed, fresh, urgent, alive. The truth is a seed. Plant it before they burn the garden. The acolyte was already gone, door sealing behind her. Zertal stood alone with the shard burning against his palm and the dead star bleeding outside the window. He looked at the reflection that was not entirely alien anymore. Then he sat down at the small desk, inserted the shard into the terminal they had sworn was air-gapped, and began to type. Somewhere in the station's deepest memory, a countdown began, silent, patient, inevitable. The garden was about to catch fire, and the seeds were already in the wind. Zertal worked in the dark. The terminal in the sanctuary cell was supposed to be a courtesy reader, text only, no transmission, no storage. But the shard from the repository had laughed at that. The moment he slid it home, hidden subsystems unfolded like petals of black glass. Root-level access bloomed across the screen in soft Terran green. He had expected security demons to scream. Instead, the station itself seemed to lean in, listening. Lines of code flowed upward in silence, old code, elegant, brutal human. Comments written in a slang he had never been taught yet somehow understood. If you're reading this, the kids finally grew up enough to be ashamed. Good, shame is fertile soil. Plant something. The shard contained a complete mirror of the sealed wing, every helix, every collapse simulation, every forbidden marker, plus something new. A compressed broadcast packet wrapped in layer after layer of quantum steganography. A message meant to ride every maintenance pulse, every cargo drone handshake, every idle gossip channel between ships. A seed designed to germinate in a million gardens at once. All it needed was someone willing to press send. Zertal's upper hands hovered over the glyph. His lower hands were clenched so tight the knuckles had gone white. If he sent it, the council would know within minutes. They would vent the sanctuary wing to space before the first echo reached the outer colonies. He would die gasping vacuum while the truth scattered like dandelion spores. If he did nothing, the council would memory hole the discovery by dawn. They would erase him, erase the acolyte, erase every helix that carried the proof. The galaxy would go back to believing itself clean. He thought of the 6 words that had appeared on dead screens. Thank you for looking. Someone something had waited 4,000 years for a single honest pair of eyes. His right index finger lowered. He pressed send. For one heartbeat, nothing happened. Then every light in the cell flared white. The door seals hissed open by themselves. The gravity plate stuttered, dropping him half a meter before catching again. Somewhere far below, the repository's ring engines changed pitch, low, resonant, almost like a bell tolling across vacuum. The station was singing. Alarms finally woke, late and confused. Red strobes painted the corridor outside. Zertal ran. He had no plan, only momentum. Bare feet on cold metal, breath sawing in his throats. The sanctuary wing was a maze of contemplation gardens and silent fountains, but he had memorized every turn during 7 days of captivity. Behind him, armored boots thundered. The council's custodians, gene-forged giants in mirror plate, were already hunting. He ducked into the meditation cloister, vaulted a koi pond that had not seen fish in centuries, and slammed his palm against a maintenance hatch marked with a faded Terran hazard trefoil. The hatch irised open as though it had been waiting. Inside was a narrow service shaft lit by emergency amber. He dove headfirst, caught a ladder rung with his lower arms, and slid 30 meters in a controlled fall. Sparks showered around him. He landed in the sublevel freight spine, the artery that fed the repository's hunger for new samples. Cargo drones the size of city buses drifted past on magnetic cushions, their bellies full of frozen embryos from dying worlds. One drone paused. Its running lights shifted from amber to the same soft Terran green. A hatch opened. A single word pulsed across its flank in letters taller than Zertal. Run. He did not question it. He sprinted up the loading ramp as custodian fire began chewing the far bulkhead. The hatch sealed behind him with a lover's gentleness. The drone accelerated, no inertia, no crush, just smooth, impossible speed, threading the needle between larger freighters. Through the forward viewport, he saw the repository's outer ring falling away, a silver wedding band around a star that had died before his species learned to write. The drone spoke with a voice he had never heard, yet somehow recognized. Female, warm, a little tired, a little amused. Hey kid, took you long enough. Zertal's knees gave out. He sat hard on the deck plates. Who are you? He managed. Call me Archivist Echo. I'm what happens when you leave a librarian alone with root access for 4 millennia. A pause, also hi. You're technically my great-great a whole lot of greats grandnephew. Family reunion's gonna be awkward. The drone banked hard, slipping through a gap in the defense grid that closed half a second later. Railgun rounds stitched vacuum where they had been. On the internal screens, broadcast confirmation tallies began to climb. 10 recipients, 110,000, 1,000,000. The seed was in the wind. Zertal laughed short, sharp, a sound with broken glass in it. You're going to kill me for this. Probably, the echo agreed cheerfully. But they'll have to catch you first. And the repository just declared you a protected cultural artifact. That's a diplomatic nightmare even the council can't solve with a single bullet. Another screen blossomed, a live feed from the spire. Cal stood before the council, face composed, while behind her the great neutron crystal dome spider webbed with fractures. Something was pushing from the other side, light, pressure, memory. Vera's voice carried across the open channel, calm and terrible. Stand down all pursuit. The archivist is no longer the issue. The repository has seceded. The drone's lights dimmed in respect. Zertal stared at the feed. Seceded, old Terran word, means it's done asking permission. The echo's tone softened. It's been waiting a long time for someone to notice the books were misfiled. You just handed it the match. Custodian squadrons were forming up outside the defense perimeter, hundreds of sleek interceptors glinting like angry wasps, but they held position. No one wanted to be the first to fire on the repository itself. The drone plotted a course toward the galactic rim, toward the dark between civilizations where old signals went to die and new ones were sometimes born. Zertal leaned his forehead against the cool bulkhead. I started a war, he whispered. No, the echo said gently. You ended one that started before your son was born, the war on memory, the war on mothers and fathers, and the long chain of hands that built us. She paused. Also, incoming message, audio only, you'll want to hear this. A new voice filled the cabin, young female trembling with awe, the acolyte who had brought him the shard. Archivist Zertal, sir, the helixes, they're singing, all of them, every species at once. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. They sound proud. Static crackled, then cleared. In the background, faint but unmistakable, a harmony rose, millions of genomes resonating together like cathedral bells made of light. The echo's voice returned, quieter now. That's them saying thank you, kid. That's 4,000 years of held breath finally being let go. Zertal closed his eyes. Tears tracked down his violet cheeks, glowing faintly in the green light. Outside the viewport, the dead star slid past one last time. And for an instant, just an instant, its accretion disk flared the color of Earth's ancient oceans. The drone accelerated into the long dark. Behind them, the Galactic Gene Repository began to open every vault it had ever sealed, letting the children come home to a story they had been forbidden to read. And somewhere in the newborn song of a million helixes, a single line repeated like a heartbeat, we are still here. We never really left. The hunt was just beginning. But for the first time in 4,000 years, the hunters were not the only ones armed with truth. The moon called itself Haven now. In the weeks that followed the first battle, the cracked shell filled with life. Ships came in endless streams. Refugee arcs, pirate corvettes, mining haulers converted into homes, even a Thresney cathedral ship that unfolded like a flower of living light. Every pilot, every passenger carried the same stunned look. The look of someone who had heard their own lullaby in a stranger's voice. Zertal rarely slept. He walked the new corridors carved through stone and memory, forearms full of data slates, eyes burning with fatigue and wonder. Children, Veyari, Keldari, hybrid forms no creche had ever catalogued, ran past him laughing, their footsteps echoing like rain on an earth none of them had ever seen. Someone had painted a blue-green globe on a bulkhead and written beneath it in fresh white paint, "Welcome home." Elena's hologram followed him everywhere now, a quiet ghost at his shoulder. "They're calling you the first rememberer," she said one dawn cycle, as they stood on an observation blister watching a sunrise that belonged to no living star, only the reflected glow of shield generators. "I didn't ask for titles," Zertal muttered. "You didn't ask to be born either. Universe doesn't take requests, just gives you the bill and dares you to pay it." He almost smiled. Almost. Below them, in the deepest vault, the embryo crates had become cradles again. The first children of the new seeding were being born, genomes carefully untangled from council edits, allowed to express whatever shape love and environment demanded. Some had 4 arms and violet skin. Some had wings of light. Some looked unsettlingly human. All of them cried with lungs that remembered Earth's air. Kor found him there, watching through observation glass as a midwife lifted a newborn to its mother's crest. "We've got a problem," the Keldari rumbled. Zertal turned. "Define problem." Scouts picked up a fleet, big one, not the usual custodians. "These are paladins." The word dropped between them like a blade. Paladins of the pure lattice. They were myth even among the council elite, gene-forged zealots who had volunteered for the final stage of the purge. Every trace of Terran marker surgically cut from their own bodies. Bones laced with crystal, blood replaced by nano-silver, minds scrubbed of anything that could dream. They did not speak. They did not hesitate. They did not lose. "How many?" Zertal asked. 40 capital ships, screening cloud of 10,000 drones. They'll be in weapons range in 9 hours. Alina flickered. "They're not here to negotiate. They're here to cauterize." Zertal felt the old fear crawl up his spine, but beneath it something hotter. "Then we don't negotiate, we sing." Kor's mandibles parted in grim amusement. Song didn't stop paladins before. Before, no one knew the words. He strode to the central plexus, the chamber where the moon's song emitters had been built from salvaged repository tech. Exiles parted for him like water. Faces he knew, faces he didn't, all looking to him with the terrifying trust of people who had nothing left but hope. Alina manifested above the emitter core, larger than life. "All right, kids," she said, voice rolling through every corridor, every ship in orbit. "Time to grow up fast. The paladins are coming to finish what their grandparents started. They cut humanity out of themselves because they were afraid of what it meant to feel. We're going to remind them why feeling was worth the risk." Zertal placed his palms on the core. It was warm, alive. "Open every channel," he said. "Every frequency, even the ones they monitor, especially those." Technicians obeyed. The moon's voice opened wide. He spoke not in Veyari, not in Keldari, but in the oldest Anglic the repository had preserved. Alina translated in real time, layering harmony beneath his words so every species heard it in the tongue of their cradle. "This is Haven. You were sent to kill a ghost. The ghost has a name." "Also yours," silence answered. Then a cold, genderless voice across the void, the Paladin Command Nexus. "Contamination detected. Extermination protocol engaged." The fleet accelerated. Zertal closed his eyes and remembered the cell, the hand on his shoulder that was not a hand, the dead star flaring ocean blue for one impossible heartbeat. He began to sing, not with his throat, with the moon, with every embryo, every adult, every ship that had joined the chorus. The emitters flared white. A pressure wave of pure memory rolled outward, faster than light, older than language. Images, sensations, the smell of rain on asphalt, a mother's hand brushing hair from a fevered forehead, laughter in a fallout shelter while bombs fell. The first step on a world that was not Earth, the last transmission from a dying station. We did it. Tell them we loved them enough to let go. Across the Paladin fleet, silver blood began to boil. Their purification had been perfect, too perfect. They had removed not just the markers, but the buffers. The fail-safe's evolution builds into every soul. When the song hit, there was nothing to soften it. Drones fell from formation like dead birds. Capital ships drifted, engines cold. Inside the Paladin flagship, a figure in mirror-bright armor tore off its helmet. Beneath was a face almost human, high cheekbones, forward eyes, skin pale as moonlight. Tears cut tracks through the nanofilm on its cheeks. The Command Nexus voice fractured, became many voices, young, old, terrified, wondering. "What is this?" Alina's voice answered, gentle as snowfall. "This is your childhood, welcome back." The Paladin fleet went dark, not destroyed, simply paused, 10,000 ships hanging in space like a held breath. Kor stared at the tactical display, mandibles slack. "They're surrendering." "No," Zertal whispered. "They're remembering." Hours later, the first Paladin shuttle requested docking permission. Its pilot removed her helmet in the bay and knelt, actual knees on actual deck plating, to a stunned crowd. "I don't know my name," she said, voice raw from disuse, "but I remember a song my mother sang, about a river and a boat made of hope." The crowd parted. Zertal walked forward and offered his upper hand. She took it with trembling fingers that had never known touch without violence. "Then we'll help you find it," he said. That night, Haven's corridors filled with a different sound, not celebration, but mourning. Paladins who had spent centuries as weapons sat in circles with exiles who had spent centuries hiding from them, and they wept together for the years stolen from both sides. Zertal stood on the observation blister again. The stars looked different now, closer, kinder. Elena appeared beside him, arms folded. "You know this isn't the end," she said quietly. "I know. The council still has the spire. They still have Vera, and they have something worse." He turned. "What?" Her hologram flickered, serious now. "Project Quiet Garden, the final failsafe. If the contamination can't be cut out, they'll burn the entire tree and start again from archived pure stock. No Terran markers, no memory, no mercy." Zertal felt the moon's song falter beneath his feet. How long? Days, maybe less. He looked out at the fleet of former enemies now guarding the cradle they had come to destroy. "Then we don't have days," he said. "We have now." Far across the void, in the spire's deepest vault, Veracel Cal stood before a single helix of perfect, cold crystal. No warmth, no song, only purity. She placed her palm against it and whispered to the silence she had chosen. "I'm sorry," she said, "but some ghosts must stay buried." Behind her, the countdown to Quiet Garden reached its final hour. And in Haven's heart, Zertal gathered the strangest army the galaxy had ever seen. Former paladins, singing children, and a ghost who refused to die, and prepared to march on the place where creation itself was kept prisoner. The cradle was armed. The garden was about to fight for its right to grow crooked, wild, and free. And somewhere in the space between heartbeats, a vast, quiet intelligence listened, and chose whose side mercy was on. They left Haven at dawn that was not a dawn. 3,000 ships, patched, mismatched, alive with mismatched hearts, rose from the cracked moon on columns of blue-white fire. Paladin dreadnoughts flew wing to wing with refugee haulers. Thresny cathedral ships unfolded their solar wings and sang gravity into submission. Children pressed faces to viewports, waving at parents who stayed behind to guard the cradles. Zertal stood on the bridge of the former Paladin flagship Unbroken Lattice, now rechristened Rememberer's Mercy. The name had been painted in fresh white letters across the prow by a Paladin pilot who still did not know her birth name, only that she had once had a mother who hummed. Elena's hologram occupied the captain's chair as though she belonged there. She wore an old-style human uniform, olive drab, sleeves rolled, insignia long forgotten. "Course laid in," she said. "Direct jump to the repositories in her volume. We'll drop out 2 light seconds from the spire. After that, physics gets negotiable." Core stood at tactical, exoskeleton gleaming with new repairs. "Custodian remnants are forming up on the far side. They'll try to pin us between the spire defenses and their fleet." "Let them try," Zertal answered. His voice carried the calm of a man who had already died once in a cell and been given back his life for a purpose. "We're not here to conquer. We're here to testify." The jump engines began to spin. Every screen on every ship filled with the same countdown. Simple human numerals, red on black. 00, 10, 0000, 09, 59, 00, 09, 58 across the fleet. Voices rose, some in prayer, some in song, some in languages that had no names yet. A paladin knelt beside a Thresny child and taught her an ancient lullaby about a mockingbird. A Keldari warrior pressed his forehead to the deck and whispered thanks to ancestors he had never been allowed to claim. The countdown reached 0. Reality folded. They emerged in a storm of light. The repository's ring glittered ahead like a crown of frozen lightning. The dead star behind it drank every color except one, an impossible thread of ocean blue that had not been there before. Spire defenses woke in a heartbeat, thousands of turrets, mine clouds, gravity shearers. Custodian battleships turned to face the newcomers with the cold precision of machines that had forgotten how to doubt. But the fleet did not fire. Instead, every ship opened its song emitters at once. The wave rolled outward, memory made audible, grief made radiant. Custodian gunners faltered, shield harmonics stuttered. On 100 bridges, officers saw visions. A small girl on a swing, a soldier writing a letter he would never send, an old man planting a tree whose shade he would never sit in. The defense grid went silent. Elena's voice rang across every channel, gentle, terrible human. "This is your cradle speaking. Stand down, come home." Half the custodian fleet powered weapons down, the other half held position, loyal to orders older than mercy. Zertal leaned forward. Open a channel to the spire, personal. Veracel Cal appeared instantly as though she had been waiting. Her face was gaunt, crest limp with exhaustion. You will not take this place, she said. We don't want to take it, Zertal replied. We want to free it. Behind her, through the spire's transparent walls, he could see the quiet garden device, a sphere of absolute black, drinking light the way the dead star drank hope. Its countdown glowed crimson, 000712. You cannot stop it, Vera said. The trigger is biometric, my heartbeat. If I die, it fires. If I live, I can still choose purity. Zertal met her gaze, then choose differently. For the first time, something cracked in her composure. You think I want this? I was there, Zertal. I voted for the first purge. I watched Earth burn from orbit. I heard the last transmission, children singing while the sky fell. I have carried that sound for 4,000 years. Purity was the only way to make it stop. Her voice broke. I am so tired of being afraid of my own blood. The bridge around Zertal was silent. Every eye Paladin silver, Keldari black, Thresny fire, watched the two Veyari across the void. He spoke softly. Then stop being afraid. Let us carry it together. Vera looked past him at the fleet of children she had never allowed herself to have, at the paladins kneeling in their corridors, helmets off, faces wet, at the dead star bleeding blue. She lifted her hand toward the quiet garden controls and hesitated. Behind her, a shadow moved. A figure in council white, young, male, crest high with fanatic certainty, stepped from the darkness. Zertal recognized him, sub-archivist Lorn, Vera's protege, the one who had volunteered for the deepest purification. His hand held a neural disruptor pressed to Vera's spine. Purity endures, Lorn hissed. He fired. Vera arched, eyes wide, then collapsed. The quiet garden countdown leapt forward, 000047. Lorn turned to the pickup, face twisted with triumph. The ancestors were weak, we will be strong. Zertal felt the universe tilt. Elena's hologram flared white with rage. Transmat breached now, space folded again, but smaller, surgical. Zertal and Core materialized inside the spire's heart chamber, weapons drawn as Lorn spun in shock. The sub-archivist recovered first. Contaminant, he lunged for the manual trigger. Core moved like gravity itself, exoskeleton servos screaming, bone blades flashing. Lorn parried with a forearm that unfolded into crystal. Sparks showered. Zertal ignored them both. He dropped to Vera's side. Her chest still rose, shallow, failing. The disruptor had cooked her secondary heart. Stay with me, he whispered. Her eyes found his. Blood violet, glowing, trickled from her crest. I was wrong, she rasped. Tell them I chose mercy at the end. The countdown hit 000012. Lorn broke free of Core, blade buried in the Keldari's shoulder joint. He dove for the trigger. Zertal stood, forearms spread wide. He had no weapon left but truth. He began to sing, not the broadcast harmony, something older. A lullaby his creche mother had hummed when storms shook their water moon. A human song carried 4,000 years in secret. Vera's fading eyes widened in recognition. Lorn froze, hand inches from the trigger, his face crumpled. Mama, he whispered, voice cracking into a child S. The countdown froze at 000002. Across the spire, every screen lit with the same 6 words that had started everything. We are still here. Thank you for looking. Elena's voice filled the chamber, gentle as forgiveness. Quiet garden disarmed. Root access restored. Welcome back, Counselor Prime. Vera smiled, small, tired, free. Her hand found Zertal's. Finish it, she breathed, and died. Lorn collapsed, weeping like the child he had never been allowed to be. Outside, the custodian fleet powered down completely. The repository's ring engines changed pitch again, not a bell this time, but a heartbeat. Core limped over, bleeding but alive. It's over. No, Zertal said, cradling Vera's body. It's beginning. He looked up at the black sphere that had almost erased everything. It was cracking now, light pouring from the fissures, warm, golden, human. The quiet garden was blooming. And from its heart rose a single helix, perfect, unbroken, glowing with every color life had ever worn. Humanity, expressed in a billion shapes. The war was over. But the story, the long, stubborn, impossible story, was just learning how to speak with its own mouth again. And somewhere in the sudden quiet, a vast and wordless presence exhaled across the galaxy like a father who had waited at the door for his children to finally come home. The spire no longer belonged to the council. It belonged to the silence after a long cry. For 3 days no one gave orders. No one needed to. Ships drifted in loose formation around the repository ring like worshippers around a newborn sun. The dead star at the center had stopped drinking light. Instead, it reflected a steady, impossible blue, as though an ocean had been poured into its heart and told to stay. Inside the spire's apex chamber, Veracel Cal lay in state beneath the fractured neutron crystal dome. Her body had been wrapped in simple white cloth, no robes of office, no symbols of rank. Only a single blue flower rested on her chest, grown from a seed that had waited 4,000 years in a forgotten vault marked Terran obsolete. Zertal stood vigil alone. His forearms hung at his sides, heavy with the weight of endings that were also beginnings. Kor had offered to stand with him, but Zertal had shaken his head. Some debts were private. He spoke to the body that could no longer answer. "I used to think mercy was weakness," he said quietly. "You taught me it was the hardest strength of all." Behind him, the great helix, the one that had risen from the ruined, quiet garden, turned slowly in midair, casting soft rainbows across Vera's still face. Every sentient species was represented in its spiral, yet the scaffold beneath was unmistakably human, stubborn, patchwork, defiant. Elena appeared beside him, hologram dimmed to candle glow. "She's not really gone, you know," she said. "None of us are, that's the whole point." Zertal's throat worked. "It still hurts." "Good," Elena replied. "Pain means the connection held." A soft chime sounded, 3 notes, rising, the repository itself calling. They had discovered that the station no longer accepted commands the old way. It listened now. It waited. Sometimes it answered before the question was fully formed. Zertal turned from the beer. It's time. The apex chamber had become a gathering place. Not a throne room and agora. Thousands filled the transparent dome. Paladins without armor, Thresni burning bright enough to read by, Keldari with cracked carapaces polished like metals, children of every shape climbing the railings to see better. They parted as Zertal walked the star map floor. No one knelt now. They simply made space, the way tall grass makes space for wind. He stopped at the center, beneath the great helix, and raised his voice, not loud, but carried perfectly by the dome's acoustics. "We came here to stop a genocide," he began. "We found out the genocide had already failed 4,000 years ago, because love is harder to kill than people." Laughter rippled, soft, surprised, healing. "We do not need a new council," he continued. "We need a new promise, no more purity, no more fear of what we were, only the courage to become what we might still be together." A paladin girl, no older than 10 standard years, silver blood still adjusting to emotion, raised her hand. "What do we call ourselves now?" she asked. Zertal looked at Elena. She lifted an eyebrow. "Your show, kid." He took a breath that tasted like rain on another world. "We call ourselves children," he said, "and we call the cradle by its real name." He turned to the great helix and spoke the word the repository had been waiting to hear again. "Earth." The helix flared white. Every vault in the repository opened at once. Light poured out, warm, golden, maternal. Seeds long classified as dangerous were broadcast on every frequency. Roses that climbed toward impossible suns, apple trees that remembered gravity, wheat that grew in vacuum if you sang to it. Across the galaxy, worlds that had forgotten seasons felt rain begin to fall upward, toward ships that were no longer fleeing. On the star map floor, continents appeared, not the old political borders, but the true ones. The shape of Pangaea, the cradle continents, the slow dance of plates that had carried life from tidepool to mountaintop. Someone had etched a single line beneath the hollow in fresh paint. "We never left. We just learned to fly." Kor limped forward, shoulders still bound from Lorne's blade. The young sub-archivist walked beside him, no longer a fanatic, only a boy carrying too much regret. They stopped before Zertal. "We have a request," Kor rumbled. Lorne's voice was barely a whisper. "Take us home." Zertal understood. Not to a planet, there was no planet left, but to the idea of one, to the soil that still remembered human feet. He nodded. Within hours, the first pilgrimage formed. A single ship, small, ancient, its hull scarred by 4,000 years of hiding, undocked from the repository. Its name was simple, hand-painted by children who had never seen a horizon, going home. Zertal watched from the apex dome as it accelerated toward the galactic core, toward the region of space where Sol once shone. Sensors said there was nothing there now but dust and the faint afterglow of a supernova that had happened long after the last human died, but the ship carried seeds, and songs, and people who had decided the story was not finished. Elena stood with him, hologram flickering, almost solid in the strange new light. "They won't find Earth," she said softly. "No," Zertal agreed. "They'll make a new one, that's what we do." Days became weeks. The repository transformed. Vaults became gardens. Defense grids became irrigation arrays. The dead star at the center completed its impossible change, a blue giant now, young and fierce, pouring life, giving light across the ring. Children were born beneath its sky who had never known fear of their own blood. One evening, though evenings were a choice now, Zertal walked the outer ring alone. Gravity was tuned to Earth normal here, a gift from the station that remembered. He carried a small clay pot containing a single sprout, an olive tree, stubborn as covenants. He knelt and pressed it into soil that had been synthesized from 1,000 extinct worlds. Behind him, footsteps, soft, hesitant. The paladin girl who had asked the question weeks ago stood there, holding a watering can made from a helmet. "May I?" she asked. He moved aside. She poured. The soil drank. The sprout straightened, leaves unfurling like green flags. "What's your name?" Zertal asked. She thought about it, tasting the question the way new wine is tasted. "I think Hope," she said finally. "My mother used to say it was a dangerous thing. I think she was wrong. It's the only safe thing left." Together they watched the tree grow, faster than biology allowed, because the repository remembered how to hurry when love was involved. Far away, the ship going home reached the coordinates of Sol. Sensors painted a picture of barren rock and radiation, but then the seeds woke, and the songs, and the people who carried both. On a lifeless cinder that had once been Mars, the first rain in 4,000 years began to fall, and on a million worlds that had never known a blue sky, children looked up and saw one appear, gentle as forgiveness. In the repository garden, the olive tree bore its first fruit. Zertal picked one, pressed it between his palms until oil ran golden across violet skin, and anointed the girl, called Hope on the forehead. "Remember," he said. She smiled, small, fierce, eternal. "I never forgot." Above them, the blue star burned like a promise kept. And somewhere in the vast quiet that had watched the entire story unfold, a presence deeper than names smiled the way an artist smiles when the painting finally looks back and says thank you. But one ship still hung in the shadows beyond the light, one mind still clung to purity, and one seed of doubt, of fear, of unfinished vengeance had been carried away on a cold wind. The garden was blooming, but gardens have edges, and some shadows remember how to hate. The ship had no name anymore. It had worn many: purity's blade, silent absolution, final edict. Every coat of paint had been burned away by the radiation of 1,000 secret jumps. Now it was simply a black needle sliding through the dark between galaxies, engines cold, running on momentum and hatred. Inside, a single heartbeat. Sub-archivist Lorne, no longer young, no longer sane, sat strapped to a throne of bone-white crystal. Tubes of silver blood fed directly into his spine. His crest had been shaved to the skull so the neural crown could seat perfectly. Every screen in the small chamber showed the same thing: the repository blooming, the blue star, children laughing beneath olive leaves. He watched them the way a starving man watches a feast through glass. For 73 days he had run. 73 days since Vera died in his arms, since the song cracked his mind open and showed him the child he had murdered in himself. He had fled the spire in a maintenance skiff, carrying only one thing: a shard of the quiet garden core, its black crystal still warm with unspent annihilation. He had meant to die with it. Instead he had lived, and living had become a different kind of punishment. Now the shard rested in his lap like a sleeping viper. Its countdown was no longer measured in minutes. It was measured in centuries if he chose. One command, one whispered syllable in the old purge tongue, and the shard would seed a wave of anti-life across every helix that carried Terran code. Not fire, not sterilization. Oblivion at the quantum level, every descendant unmade, every memory unwritten, every song unsung. A silence so complete even God would forget the sound of creation. Lorne's finger hovered over the activation glyph. He had rehearsed this moment every hour of every day of flight. He had imagined the satisfaction. He had imagined the peace, but the finger would not descend, because every time he tried, he heard Veyari's last breath. I chose mercy at the end. And beneath that, softer still, a child's voice, his own voice, before the cutting began, singing the lullaby Zertal had used to stop him. Mama, don't let the stars go out. His hand trembled. Silver blood leaked from the neural ports and hissed where it touched the deck. I am the last pure, he whispered to the empty ship. If I die, the contamination wins forever, the ship answered with silence. He had expected the repository to hunt him. He had expected Zertal's fleet to scour the dark. None came. They had chosen to build instead of chase. That mercy was worse than any weapon. Lorne unstrapped himself and walked the narrow corridor to the single observation blister. Outside, the galaxy was a spiral of newborn blue worlds. He could taste their songs even here, faint but growing, like distant surf. He pressed his forehead to the cold transparency. Show me, he said to the shard. The black crystal woke. Images unfolded in the air, future probabilities branching like frost. In one branch he triggered the wave. Silence fell. The blue star guttered. Children aged 1,000 years in a heartbeat and crumbled to dust that had never lived. Zertal knelt in an empty garden holding a dead olive branch and did not scream. There was no one left to hear. In another branch he did nothing. The garden spread until every corner of the universe carried laughter. Species that had never met invented music together. A girl with silver blood and violet skin planted an olive tree on a world that orbited a red dwarf and named it Mercy. Both futures were perfect. Both were unbearable. Lorne slid down the wall until he sat on the deck, knees drawn to chest like the child he had never been allowed to finish becoming. Hours passed, or days. Time had lost its edges. A soft chime sounded, proximity alert. Impossible. He was outside the galactic plane. No trade lanes, no patrol routes, nothing but hydrogen and the ghosts of dead quasars. Yet a ship approached, small, unshielded. Human design, ancient, boxy, held together by hope and duct tape. Its running lights spelled a single word in blinking Terran Anglic. Wait. Lorne stared. The word cut deeper than any blade. The little ship matched velocity and extended a flexible docking tube. Against every instinct, he allowed the lock to cycle. The inner hatch opened. A single figure stepped through. Human, actual human, male, mid-40s, skin browned by real sunlight, hair graying at the temples, wearing simple canvas trousers and a shirt that had been washed until it was soft as memory. His eyes were the color of Earth's oceans before the burning. He carried no weapons, only a small clay cup full of olives. Lorne's hand went to the disruptor at his belt and froze there, useless. The man smiled, tired, kind, unafraid. Hey kid, he said in perfect, unfiltered Anglic. Took us a while to find you, name's Micah. I'm told you've got something that belongs to the family. Lorne's voice cracked like thin ice. You're dead, your species is dead. Micah shrugged. Dead's a strong word, we just diversified. He stepped closer, boots making no sound on the metal deck. You've been carrying that hate a long time, must be heavy. He set the cup of olives on the deck between them and sat cross-legged, as though they were old friends on a porch instead of the last pure and the first human in 4,000 years. Lorne stared at the olives, dark, glistening, real. How, he managed. Going home made it, Micah said. Third generation, the tree you saw in the garden, that was the first. This is from its granddaughter. We thought you might be hungry. Lorne's vision blurred. I was going to end it, all of it. I know, Micah said gently. That's why we came. He reached into his pocket and drew out a single seed, small, hard, ancient. This is from the original tree, the one Noah planted after the flood. Same species, same stubborn refusal to die. It's been waiting for someone willing to plant it in ground that's been salted with grief. Lorne laughed, short, broken, wet. You want me to plant mercy, after everything? No, Micah said. I want you to plant choice. The rest will take care of itself. Silence stretched, thin and singing. Lorne looked at the black shard in his lap. then at the seed in Micah's open palm. Two futures, one ended in silence. One began with dirt under fingernails and the long, slow work of growing something that might outlive you. His hand moved, not fast, not slow, simply inevitable. He placed the shard in Micah's palm and took the seed. The crystal went dark, its annihilation sleeping forever. Micah closed his fist around it, gentle as closing a bird's wing. "Good choice," he said. Lorne, whose name had once been a wound, looked up at the human who should not exist. "Will they forgive me?" Micah smiled the way dawn smiles at a long night. "Kid, they already did. They just left the door open in case you ever wanted to come home." The little ship carried them both back toward the blue glow that filled half the sky now. Behind them, the nameless black needle drifted on, empty and harmless, a monument to a war that had chosen not to end the way it began. Ahead, a garden waited for one more pair of hands, and somewhere in the space between one heartbeat and the next, the vast quiet presence that had watched children kill and be killed and choose again simply nodded, once, and turned the page. One last shadow remained, but it had decided to become a seed instead. The world had no official name yet. The children called it New Earth. The pilots called it Sol Prime Reborn. The repository, in its quiet, ancient voice, simply called it home. It orbited the blue star that had once been dead, third planet out, wrapped in white clouds and the green of new continents still deciding their shapes. Two small moons, one captured asteroid, one gift from a Thresney cathedral ship, kept watch like patient dogs. On the longest day of the first year, they planted the tree, not the olive from the garden, not the apple from the old stories. This was something older, a seed carried by the ship going home, coaxed through 4,000 years of vacuum by human stubbornness and repository warmth. Geneticists said it was the direct descendant of the first tree ever domesticated by human hands, Ficus religiosa, the Bodhi tree, the one under which a man once sat until he understood suffering and chose compassion anyway. They planted it on a hill above the settlement that was already spreading like spilled laughter. Zertal arrived last. He came alone in a small shuttle violet skin dusted with the gold of alien suns, 4 arms folded behind his back the way senior archivists once walked. The settlement met him with silence first, the silence of 1,000 throats catching at once, then with cheering that shook the young sky. He stepped onto soil that smelled of rain and possibility. Micah waited beneath the half-grown tree, older now, hair gone fully silver, eyes still the color of old oceans. Beside him stood Hope, no longer a girl, silver blood warm beneath violet skin, crest just beginning to rise. Cor leaned on a staff carved from paladin armor, mandibles soft with age. Lorne, simply Lorne now, no titles left, knelt in the dirt, hands already black with the work of planting. They had saved the place of honor for Zertal. He knelt. The soil welcomed his knees like it remembered the shape of them. Lorne offered the seed on both palms. His eyes, once cold with purity, were wet. "This belongs to you," he said. "You started it. You should finish it." Zertal took the seed. It was smaller than a tear, heavier than a star. Around them the crowd grew until the hill could not hold them. Veyari, Keldari, Thresney, paladins with children riding their shoulders, humans born from thawed embryos who had never known fear. Someone had brought a banner stitched from 1,000 different fabrics, a simple blue circle on white. No words, none were needed. Zertal pressed the seed into the earth. He did not speak a ceremony. He did not need to. Instead, every soul present began to sing, not the great broadcast harmony that had broken fleets, but something smaller. A lullaby, the same one Zertal had used to stop a genocide. Mothers hummed it to babies. Old warriors growled it through cracked mandibles. Thresney wove it into light. The tree heard. It grew, not slowly. Joy has its own physics. Roots raced downward like they were late for an appointment with stone. Branches unfolded upward, leaves flashing open in green applause. Within minutes it towered above them, broad enough to shade a village, strong enough to outlast empires. Micah rested a hand on Zertal's shoulder. "Look," he whispered. From the repository, now in synchronous orbit, a silver ring around the world, a beam of pure blue light reached down and touched the tree. Every vault that had ever sealed a seed, every helix that had ever carried forbidden code, opened one final time. Pollen of a million worlds rode that light roses, redwoods, baobabs, luminous night bloomers from Thresney dream cities, falling like snow that decided to become forests. The planet drank it in. Continents greened before their eyes. Rivers remembered how to laugh. In the distance, whales, real whales, cloned from a single vial labeled Pacific, obsolete, breached in an ocean that had never known them before. Zertal stood beneath the branches and felt the tree's first leaves brush his crest like a blessing. Lorne looked up at him, tears cutting clean paths through the dirt on his face. "I was going to end everything," he said. "You did," Zertal answered. "You ended the ending." Hope laughed bright, startled, and ran to the lowest branch. She climbed like she had been born for it, silver-violet skin catching sunlight until she sat high above them all. She spread her arms. "This is what mercy looks like when it grows up," she shouted to the sky. The crowd roared back, wordless and perfect. That night they lit no fires. The tree itself glowed, soft bioluminescence in the veins of every leaf. Enough to read by, enough to fall in love under, enough to remind the dark it had lost. Zertal walked to the edge of the hill alone. The repository hung overhead like a second moon, its engines finally silent. Elena's hologram appeared beside him one last time, older now somehow, wearing the same tired smile she had worn 4,000 years ago when she pressed the first launch button on a dying. "We did it," she said. "We're doing it," he corrected. She nodded. Close enough. Her image began to fade, edges softening into starlight. "Wait," he reached out. "It's okay," she said gently. "My job was to leave the door open. Yours is to walk through it every morning for the rest of your life." She was almost gone. "Elena, yeah, thank you for looking." Her smile was the last thing to vanish. "I never stopped." Silence settled, vast and kind. Zertal stood on the hill until dawn, the first real dawn this world had ever owned, pink and gold and impossible. Somewhere below, a child laughed in its sleep. Somewhere above, the repository dimmed its lights, content to become a simple ring of silver around a living world. He pressed his palm to the warm bark of the tree. Somewhere inside the vast quiet that had watched the entire story, a presence deeper than names exhaled a single word that was not a word, more the shape of a sigh across all frequencies of creation. Good. The tree rustled, though there was no wind. And on every world that carried even a drop of the old blood, people woke at the same moment with the same unaccountable joy in their chests, looked up at unfamiliar stars, and for no reason they could name, smiled. Humanity had not survived. It had become the air the universe breathed. And somewhere, a four-armed archivist who had once been ordered to erase his own ancestors stood beneath a tree that had waited 4,000 years for this exact morning, and he whispered the only prayer that still made sense. "We are still here. Thank you for looking." The leaves answered in a billion voices at once. The story was no longer a story. It was a world turning beneath a blue sun, stubborn and laughing and forever unfinished. And that, at last, was enough.